Now, if we look, more closely at the political life of Confucius, we can say that Confucius' love and faith were directed much more toward the general public than towards any particular personal ruler. He is fundamentally a man of universal love. For example, at the age of 51, he almost accepted the invitation of the rebels to help with the governing. So this is the story. Gongshan Fu Rao, who was the head of the rebels, he was holding the castle in revolt against the Ji family. Now, Gongshan Fu Rao sent an invitation to Confucius. And you know what Confucius did? He expressed willingness to accept the invitation. One of Confucius' students, Zilu, and we'll keep referring back to Zilu because there's a lot of story about him. Zilu didn't approve of this invitation and said to the master, he said, well, after having refused in so many cases, why do you go to Gongshan Fu Rao of all the people? The master replied, well, it cannot be for nothing that he was sent for me. If anyone were to use me, I believe I could make a Zhou in the east. So the Zhou that Confucius was referring to was the heyday of the Western Zhou at the beginning. Remember King Wen and King Wu. Now here's another example. At the age of 61, Confucius was again invited by a rebel. And again, Confucius expressed willingness to accept. So Zilu said again, Master, formerly I heard you said that, when a man in his own person is guilty of doing evil, a superior man will not associate with him. Why do you go to him? The master replied, well, yes, I did say that. But if a thing be really hard, it may be ground without being made thin. If a thing be really white, it may be steeped in a dark fluid without being made black. Am I a bitter gourd? How can I be hung up out of the way of being eaten? Well, this is how the master put it, right? So what Confucius was saying, right, is that he was confident that a morally superior man can work with anybody and not to be influenced and compromised. So he really wanted to put his ability in good use, even for a rebel. So it is quite clear that Confucius was not a narrow patriot. Remember, he was born in the state of Lu. He had the people of the whole world in mind, and he wanted to influence the present world through government. Now, although we will come back to this point later on when we discuss economic policy making, we should mention that the concept of interstate relation during Confucius' time really was an international relation. With the declining power of the Zhou kings, remember, the major feudal states were politically independent, with their own agenda and their own ambition. So for any individual state, the whole of China Empire was in fact the whole world. The China Empire back in the spring and autumn period was very similar to the world we're living in today. The territorial expansion by military force in the old days is now replaced by economic wars. Surprisingly, in some part of the world, including certain developed countries, military force is still a mean to achieve foreign policy objectives. The similarity between the past and the present is strikingly high. We call those times the troubled days. Well, aren't we in the troubled days now? So this makes Confucius' teaching only more relevant than ever. Now, in Confucius' time, countries were very busily competing for lands and power, and rules and rights were pretty much abandoned. So Confucius understood the problem of the world, and he wanted to restore the great similarity through teaching and government influence. So what Confucius was doing was not easy at all, almost a mission impossible, if you like, but a mission necessary. What makes it a mission impossible in troubled days is that people usually lack of faith and the courage to do something about it. And this is no difference today. So Confucius visited many states and many kings, and tirelessly conveyed his principles and philosophy. But he was also constantly satirized by many of his contemporaries because they felt that the world is so evil, so that they kept to stay away from it. The annalists record a story about Confucius' view on this particular issue. So one day, Confucius and his students were walking past a piece of farmland, and a farmer called Jie Ni. Okay, he's called Jie Ni. So he was working in the field when they were passing by. So after Jie Ni got to know the identities of these passerby, he said to Zilu, Zilu again. So he said to him, social disorder is like a swelling flood, spreading over the whole empire. And who is he, as in Confucius, right? So who is he that will change the state for you? He can't change anything. So rather than following somebody who merely withdraws from one country to the other, had you not better follow those who have withdrawn from the world altogether? So in this case, Jie Ni referred to himself as the one who completely withdraw from the world, right? So when Confucius heard this, he was very disappointed, and he said, "Well, it's impossible to associate with birds and beasts, as if they were the same with us. If I associate not with these people, with mankind, with whom shall I associate? If right principles already prevailed through the empire, there would be no use for me to change its state." So it is a difficult task indeed, but for a superior man who sees this problem clearly, he must do something about this. So this is Confucius' mission, and all he wanted is to change the world and serve the world, no matter how difficult it is. And he did. Therefore, Confucius was destined not chiefly to serve his, immediate period, but to influence endless generations of the future. The Venerable Master Chin Kung once said, "We must fix our direction, and then we set out our journey with absolute sincerity." So even though we cannot do it perfectly, 1% of sincerity and respect would reward us with 1% of result. So learning the teaching of sages' education or saving the world by revitalizing traditional culture follow the same principle.